Have you ever watched someone steal years of your life and then smile while everyone applauded them? Because that's exactly what my brother did. He took my invention, put his own name on it, built an entire career from my work, and for almost 3 years, everyone believed him. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. The woman on the other end said 6 words that changed everything. "We're calling regarding your patent application." Before we get into today's revenge story, if you enjoy real stories about betrayal, justice, and the sweetest kinds of karma, make sure you like the video and subscribe. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's just answering the phone. If you've ever been the quiet sibling, you already know how this story begins. There's always one child who walks into a room and somehow becomes gravity. Everyone laughs louder, listens longer, believes every word they say. Then there's the other one, the helper, the reliable one, the invisible one. I was invisible. My name is Samantha Cooper. I'm 32 now, but for most of my life I wasn't Samantha. I was Ryan's little sister. My brother Ryan was 2 years older than me, and according to almost everyone who ever met us, he was extraordinary. Confident, funny, charming, natural leader. He could convince strangers he'd known them for years. Teachers adored him. Neighbors bragged about him. Our parents practically glowed whenever he entered a room. Then there was me. I wasn't shy. People always assumed I was. The truth was simpler. Every time I tried to speak, Ryan somehow found a way to become the conversation. If I got an A, Ryan had gotten one first. If I won a science competition, Ryan reminded everyone he had inspired me. If I built something, he'd explain it before I could. The strange part was that no one noticed. It happened gradually, like erosion, tiny pieces disappearing until there wasn't much left. I discovered engineering when I was 11, not because anyone introduced me to it, because our toaster broke. Dad had thrown it into the garage, saying we'd buy another one. Instead, I spent an entire Saturday taking it apart. Every screw fascinated me. Every spring. Every tiny piece. Machines made sense. People didn't. Machines followed rules. People rewarded confidence over competence. I fixed the toaster. Dad laughed when I carried it inside. "You actually got it working?" I plugged it in. 2 slices popped up perfectly browned. Mom smiled. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Ryan walked in. "No way. Let me see." He turned the toaster over in his hands. "Huh." Then he looked at Dad. "I told her she probably just needed to reconnect the heating element." Dad nodded. "See? Teamwork." I remember standing there, holding the screwdriver, knowing Ryan had never even entered the garage that day. I almost corrected them. Almost. Instead, I smiled. It was easier. That became the pattern. Every achievement slowly became ours. Then eventually, his. By college, I had learned something important. If I wanted credit for anything, documentation mattered. Not opinions, evidence, dates, files, versions, emails, backups. I studied mechanical engineering. Ryan studied business. He joked that I was the family nerd. Everyone laughed. Even me. I wish I hadn't. After graduation, I joined a small environmental technology company. The pay wasn't incredible. The recognition wasn't either. But I loved solving problems, especially impossible ones. Around my 3rd year there, our department was struggling with inefficient portable water purification systems used during disaster relief. Existing units were bulky, expensive, fragile. I became obsessed, not because anyone assigned it to me, because I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every evening, I'd come home to my tiny apartment, kick off my shoes, heat leftovers, then disappear into my workshop, if you could call it that. Really, it was half my garage: metal shelves, Whiteboards, coffee mugs everywhere, a soldering station, old fans humming, the smell of aluminum dust and machine oil hanging in the air. Some people meditate. I designed. Weeks became months. Months became years. Prototype after prototype. Failure after failure. I kept every notebook, every sketch, every revision. Because ideas evolve, they leave footprints. I didn't know those footprints would eventually save my life. Ryan, meanwhile, bounced between startups. He always had incredible ideas, according to him. In reality, he mostly had incredible presentations. He could sell almost anything. Execution? Someone else's problem. Whenever family visited, he'd ask about my projects. Not because he cared, because he liked sounding informed. So, still making little gadgets? Little gadgets. Thousands of hours. Little gadgets. I'd laugh it off. You'd be surprised. He'd grin. I know, Sammy. You're the genius. He always said it with just enough sarcasm to make everyone laugh. Everything changed the night he came to my garage. He brought pizza. Beer. Actually listened. That alone should have worried me. I've been thinking, he said. You've got amazing ideas. I shrugged. They're just prototypes. No. He leaned forward. They're businesses waiting to happen. Nobody had ever spoken to me like that, not even my parents. He walked around the workshop slowly, looking, really looking. His eyes lingered on the latest purifier, the one I'd finally gotten working. Compact, energy efficient, cheap to manufacture. Months earlier, I'd almost cried when clean water first flowed from the final chamber exactly as my calculations predicted. Ryan picked it up carefully. This, he smiled. This could actually change lives. For a second, I felt seen. Really seen. I've documented everything, I said. The testing isn't finished, but you know what your problem is? What? You think like an engineer. I am an engineer. Exactly. He laughed. But nobody changes the world sitting in a garage. He looked me straight in the eye. You need someone who can sell it. I should have recognized the warning. Instead, I heard opportunity. That night, we talked until nearly 2 a.m. Manufacturing, licensing, investors, patent protection, distribution. He spoke with absolute confidence. He even insisted on taking pictures so he could prepare a pitch deck. I emailed him some non-confidential renderings, market research, public testing results. Nothing that seemed dangerous. He hugged me before leaving. I'm proud of you, Sam. Nobody had ever said those words before. Not like that. I actually cried after he drove away, because, for the first time in my life, I thought my brother finally respected me. I had no idea he'd just finished casing the vault, and by the time I realized what he'd stolen, the whole world would already believe the invention belonged to him. I didn't hear from Ryan for almost 3 weeks after that night. At first, I didn't think much of it. He'd always been the kind of person who disappeared into whatever new opportunity had caught his attention. A startup, a networking event, some conference where everyone wore expensive watches and introduced themselves with job titles instead of names. Meanwhile, I went back to my routine. Work during the day, my garage workshop at night, testing filtration rates, replacing seals, redesigning a pressure valve that kept warping under heat. I lived in that strange space engineers know all too well, where every tiny improvement feels like winning a marathon. You don't celebrate loudly. You just sit there, staring at a graph or a measurement, whispering, finally. I still believed Ryan was putting together investor contacts. I still believed he wanted to help. The first crack appeared on a Sunday morning. Mom called. You should be proud of your brother. I smiled. Why? He finally found his big idea. Oh? He's launching some humanitarian technology company. I frowned. What kind of technology? Oh, sweetheart, I don't remember all the details. She laughed. Something about portable water purification. Everything inside me stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. The coffee mug in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. What exactly did he say? He said he'd been working on it for years. Years. That word echoed in my head. Years. I looked toward my garage through the kitchen window. The workbench. The notebooks. The prototypes. The machine I'd spent nearly every weekend building. No, I whispered. Mom kept talking. He has investors interested already. Investors. Interested. Already. The room suddenly felt too small. I ended the call as politely as I could before walking into the garage. The purifier sat exactly where I'd left it. The latest prototype, version 17. I opened my notebook. Every page, every date, every measurement. My handwriting blurred as panic settled into my chest. No, I kept saying it. No. Because my brain refused to connect the dots my instincts already had. Ryan wouldn't do that. Would he? I called him immediately. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. Nothing. He texted an hour later. Busy. Investor meetings? What's up? I stared at the screen, then typed. Mom mentioned a water purifier company? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, yeah! Isn't it exciting? Exciting. I called him again. This time he answered. Sis, what are you doing? What do you mean? The purifier. Silence. Just for half a second. Barely noticeable. Unless you were listening for it. I don't know what you're talking about. My purifier. Oh. His voice changed. Relaxed. Almost amused. You mean the concept? The concept? Samantha, portable water purification isn't exactly a new invention. I'm talking about my design. Our discussions inspired me. Our discussions. You never had a business. You came to my garage. And? You photographed everything. You showed it to me. I trusted you. Another pause. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. You really think you invented portable filtration? No. I improved an existing concept. So did I. Ryan. What? You stole my work. His voice became colder than I'd ever heard. Careful. I know exactly what I built. And can you prove I didn't build something similar? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because for the first time, I realized what confidence sounds like when it's wearing the mask of innocence. I have meetings, he said. We'll talk later. Click. I barely slept that night. Every possibility crashed through my head. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he'd changed enough details. Maybe. But deep down, I knew. You know when someone lies to you after you've spent your entire life watching them practice. 3 weeks later, he held a launch event. I didn't go. I watched online. Big stage. Professional lighting. A sleek logo. Investors sitting in the front row. Ryan walked out wearing a navy blazer and a smile I'd seen him perfect since high school. Confident, relaxed, magnetic. He held up a prototype. My prototype. Well, almost. The housing was a different color. The outer shell had been reshaped, but the internal architecture, I knew every curve, every connection, every chamber, because I'd spent thousands of hours designing them. He started telling the story. I've always believed clean water should be accessible everywhere. Lie. This journey began years ago. Lie. Countless nights refining the design. Lie. I nearly gave up several times. That one hurt the most. Because that part was true. He'd just borrowed my memories. The audience applauded. Investors smiled. Journalists took notes. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might throw up. Then came the headline the next morning. Young entrepreneur, reinvents disaster relief technology. Young entrepreneur, not engineer, not inventor. Entrepreneur. The man holding the microphone always gets remembered, not the person holding the wrench. People started congratulating my parents. Neighbors stopped by. Old teachers posted articles online. This doesn't surprise me. We always knew Ryan was destined for greatness. My mother framed the newspaper, framed it, and hung it in the hallway, right beside my college graduation photo. Every time I visited, I walked past my own work, displayed under someone else's name. I tried telling my parents. Just once. Dad sighed before I even finished. Honey, you don't understand. No, Samantha. He rubbed his forehead. I think you're upset because your brother became successful first. I designed it. He says he did. I have notebooks. He says he has notebooks too. He doesn't. Sweetheart. Mom reached across the table. Don't ruin your relationship over jealousy. Jealousy. That word landed harder than any insult, not because it was cruel, because they genuinely believed it. Years of being the quieter child had finally become evidence against me. Ryan spoke with certainty. I spoke with emotion. People trust certainty. For weeks, I questioned myself. Not the invention, myself. Maybe I should have patented earlier. Maybe I shouldn't have shown him anything. Maybe I was naive. Maybe. No, I wasn't naive. I trusted my brother. Those aren't the same thing. At work, things became unbearable. Someone forwarded the article. Sam, isn't this similar to that project you were always tinkering with? I forced a smile. Kind of. You should have commercialized yours. Mine. The word echoed painfully. Should have. If only they knew. One afternoon, my manager, Linda, quietly closed my office door. I've noticed you've been distracted. I stared at the floor. My brother stole something. She waited, didn't interrupt, didn't offer empty reassurance. So I told her everything. The garage, the meetings, the launch, the articles. When I finished, she leaned back. Do you have documentation? I documented everything. Good. I don't know if it'll matter. It always matters. You think so? She nodded once. Engineers leave fingerprints. That sentence stayed with me. Engineers leave fingerprints. I went home and opened every storage box I owned. Old hard drives, USB sticks, cloud backups, email archives, version histories, photographs, CAD files, time-stamped exports, lab notes, material invoices, receipts for prototype components, even security camera footage from my garage, hour after hour, night after night. My dining table disappeared beneath stacks of evidence. The deeper I looked, the calmer I became. Because something strange happened. The panic faded. Numbers don't panic. Metadata doesn't lie. Computers don't care who's charismatic. They remember. Every save, every revision, every deleted file, every upload. It felt like my past self had unknowingly spent years preparing testimony for my future self. Then came the real punch. Ryan announced on social media that his company had filed for international patent protection. Thousands of likes, hundreds of congratulations. I stared at the announcement until my eyes hurt. Filed. If the patent was granted, his lie wouldn't just be public, it would become legal history. I almost gave up that night. I really did. I sat in my garage with the lights off, listening to rain hit the roof. The purifier sat on the workbench like an accusation. 3 years. 3 years of my life. Gone. I thought about throwing it away, about walking away from engineering entirely. Maybe people like Ryan were always going to win. Maybe brilliance without confidence meant nothing. Maybe. My phone buzzed. A message from Linda. Just one sentence. Don't confuse being behind with being beaten. I read it 10 times, then 20. Finally, I stood up, turned the lights back on, opened my laptop, and created a folder with a name so simple it almost made me laugh. Evidence. Because if Ryan wanted to turn my life into a business, I was about to turn his lies into a timeline, and timelines have a funny way of exposing people who rewrite history. What I didn't know was that somewhere inside the patent office, someone had already started asking questions. Questions Ryan couldn't answer. Questions only the real inventor could. I just didn't know they were about to call me. People like to imagine that justice arrives with dramatic music. It doesn't. It usually arrives on an ordinary Tuesday while you're trying to finish a spreadsheet. 3 weeks after I created the evidence folder, I was sitting at my desk at work, half listening to the hum of fluorescent lights overhead while comparing pressure test data from an unrelated project. It was just after 11 in the morning. The office smelled faintly of burnt coffee and machine oil. Someone in the next cubicle was tapping a pen against their desk in an uneven rhythm. The air conditioner clicked on with its usual groan, completely ordinary. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Washington, D.C. I almost ignored it. Normally, I let unknown callers go to voicemail. Something made me answer. Samantha Cooper? Yes? Good morning. My name is Melissa Hart. I'm calling from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I blinked. For a second, I wondered if someone was playing a joke. I'm sorry. What? We're reviewing an application involving portable emergency water purification technology. Every muscle in my body tightened. There are several technical issues we'd like clarification on. My heart started pounding so hard I could actually hear it in my ears. I think you have the wrong person. There was a brief pause. No, Ms. Cooper. Paper shuffled on her end. Actually, I don't believe we do. She couldn't tell me everything. Patent examiners have rules, confidentiality, procedure, professional boundaries. But she could ask questions. Very specific questions. Questions only someone deeply familiar with the invention could answer. She described one component. The application references a variable pressure membrane housing. Can you explain why this geometry was selected instead of a conventional cylindrical chamber? I answered automatically. Because I knew. Not because I'd memorized anything. Because I'd designed it. The stress concentration at the lower junction causes premature fatigue under repeated pressure cycles. The asymmetrical curve distributes force more evenly. Silence. Then she asked another. What prompted the 3-stage filtration sequence? Version 1 actually had 2 stages. Another pause. I discovered mineral buildup after approximately 72 operating hours, so I separated particulate removal from biological filtration. More silence. Then another question. What was the reasoning behind? We spoke for nearly 20 minutes. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was simply explaining choices I'd lived with for years. At the end, Melissa thanked me. Then she asked one final question. When did you begin developing this technology? I answered honestly. Almost 4 years ago. Do you still possess documentation? I have everything. Everything? I documented every revision. Another pause. This one felt different. Then she said something carefully. Ms. Cooper, I cannot discuss the contents of an active examination. I understand. However, she chose her words with remarkable precision. If someone contacted you requesting documentation relevant to your work, it would be in your interest to preserve all original records. I already have. I'm glad to hear that. The call ended. I sat frozen. Linda looked over the cubicle wall. You okay? I looked at her. They called me. Who? The patent office. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply nodded once. I wondered how long it would take. That afternoon, I couldn't concentrate on anything. My mind kept replaying every question, not what she'd asked, what she hadn't. She never once asked me to prove I was the inventor. Instead, she asked me to explain the invention. There's a difference. Anyone can memorize documents. Very few people can explain years of engineering decisions without notes. 2 days later, a certified envelope arrived at my apartment. I stared at it for almost 5 minutes before opening it. Inside was a formal request, not an accusation, not a lawsuit. A request for supporting documentation concerning prior conception and development. I read the letter 3 times. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because after months of feeling powerless, someone was finally asking for evidence instead of confidence. Ryan had always been unbeatable in conversations. Now the conversation had changed. It wasn't about who sounded convincing, it was about timestamps. I turned my dining room into a war room. Every notebook was laid out chronologically. Every prototype was photographed. Every CAD file was matched to its creation date. Every email, every receipt, every cloud backup. I even recovered old automatic save files I'd forgotten existed. At one point, I found a video I'd recorded for myself after Prototype 13 failed. In it, I looked exhausted. Hair tied back, grease on my face. Half laughing, half crying. If this pressure seal fails again, I told the camera, I'm taking up gardening. I smiled despite everything. Ryan couldn't fake moments like that. You can't manufacture frustration after the fact. You can't recreate years of tiny failures that eventually become expertise. Failure leaves records too. My lawyer, David, spread everything across his conference table. He whistled softly. I've seen intellectual property disputes before. He looked up. I've never seen documentation like this. I overdocument. No. He smiled. You survived. What? People who spend years having their work questioned learn to keep receipts. That hit harder than I expected. Because it was true. I hadn't become meticulous because engineering demanded it. I'd become meticulous because nobody believed me unless I could prove every sentence. Ryan had unknowingly spent our entire childhood training me for this moment. Meanwhile, his company kept growing. New interviews, industry awards, magazine features. One article called him the visionary engineer reshaping humanitarian technology. Visionary engineer. He hadn't engineered anything. But every headline made the eventual fall steeper. David noticed me reading another interview. Stop. I can't. Yes, you can. He keeps lying, and every interview creates another statement. I don't understand. Public statements become evidence too. I looked at him. He isn't just telling stories anymore. David folded the magazine shut. He's creating a timeline. A false timeline. One we'd eventually compare against the real one. Weeks passed. Slowly. Painfully. There were no dramatic courtroom scenes. No surprise arrests. Real investigations move like glaciers. Quiet. Methodical. Almost invisible. Sometimes I'd convince myself nothing was happening. Then another request for documents would arrive. Another technical clarification, another question about prototype evolution. Each one reminded me the process was still moving. Somewhere, behind closed doors. Then came the first crack in Ryan's perfect image. A trade publication published a short correction. Apparently, he'd canceled a technical demonstration at the last minute. The official explanation cited equipment issues. David smiled when he read it. That's interesting. Why? Because investors usually want founders to answer technical questions. You think. I think charm only gets you through the introduction. He tapped the article. Eventually, someone asks how the machine works. A month later, an old college friend called me. He worked for a manufacturing company. "You didn't hear this from me." "Hear what?" "Ryan's engineers are frustrated." "Why?" "He keeps overruling technical decisions." "So?" "He doesn't understand the technical decisions." I closed my eyes. Apparently, pretending to be an inventor becomes difficult when actual inventors start asking questions. Then came another phone call. This one from David. "They've requested an interview." "The patent office?" "Yes." I swallowed. "Is that good?" "It's significant." "What does it mean?" "It means your documentation raised enough questions that they want to hear directly from you." "When?" "Thursday." I barely slept, not because I was afraid of answering questions, because I was terrified of one thing. What if none of this mattered? What if evidence wasn't enough? What if confidence won again? Thursday arrived. The interview lasted nearly 3 hours. They asked about design evolution, material selection, prototype failures, manufacturing limitations, future improvements. Sometimes they interrupted me with follow-up questions so detailed they bordered on microscopic. I welcomed everyone, because every question lived somewhere inside years of work I'd actually done. Near the end, one examiner asked quietly, "What was the most difficult engineering challenge?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I remembered the winter nights, frozen fingers in my garage, failed pressure tests, cracked housings, months of self-doubt. Finally, I smiled, believing the solution existed before I could prove it. He wrote something down, then nodded. No expression, no hint. Just, "Thank you, Ms. Cooper." As I stood to leave, Melissa, the examiner who had first called me, walked me toward the elevator. She couldn't discuss the case. She never crossed that line. But just before the doors closed, she said one sentence. "The truth has a remarkable memory." The elevator doors shut. I stood there staring at my reflection. For months I'd been chasing justice. Now, justice finally seemed to be walking toward Ryan, and unlike me, it already knew exactly where to find him. By the time the investigation reached its final stage, I had stopped checking Ryan's social media. Not because I didn't care, because I cared too much. For months, every interview, every magazine cover, every smiling photograph had felt like another reminder that the world rewards the person who tells the best story, not always the person who lived it. I couldn't keep doing that to myself. So I went back to work, back to engineering, back to solving problems that didn't lie. Every evening, I'd make dinner, spend an hour reading, and force myself not to imagine what was happening behind the scenes. If justice came, it would come. If it didn't, at least I would still know who I was. That turned out to be the hardest lesson of the entire experience. For months, I'd believed my identity depended on proving Ryan wrong. Slowly, I realized something different. The invention had always been mine. His lie had never changed that. It had only delayed everyone else from discovering it. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. David sounded calmer than usual. "Are you sitting down?" "I'm at work." "Good enough." A pause. "The patent office has rejected Ryan's primary claims." I closed my eyes. The office around me faded into silence. They cited extensive evidence of prior conception and inconsistent inventor statements. I couldn't speak. "They're also recognizing you as the documented inventor for the claimed innovations." I leaned back in my chair. For almost a full minute, neither of us said anything. Not because there was nothing to say, because some victories are too heavy for words. "They believed me?" David laughed softly. "No, Samantha. They believed the evidence." Within days, the consequences began unfolding faster than I expected. Ryan's investors demanded emergency meetings. His board requested technical documentation. Journalists started asking uncomfortable questions. One publication quietly edited an old profile, replacing inventor with company founder. Another removed an interview entirely. The internet has a strange relationship with success. People love building heroes. They love tearing them down almost as much. I watched from a distance, not celebrating, just observing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to convince anyone. The facts were doing that for me. Ryan called. 23 times in 2 days. I didn't answer. Eventually, he left a voicemail. Sam, please. His voice sounded smaller than I remembered. We need to talk. No confidence, no jokes, no charm. Just panic. Another message arrived later that evening. You don't understand what's happening. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed 3 words. I understand perfectly. Nothing more, nothing less. A week later, he appeared outside my apartment. He looked exhausted. His expensive suits had disappeared, replaced by wrinkled jeans and an old jacket I'd seen him wear years before. For a moment, he looked like my older brother again. Then he spoke. You could have warned me. I almost laughed. Warned him? I trusted you. I know. You stole my work. I know. You let Mom and Dad believe I was jealous. His voice cracked. I didn't think it'd go this far. That sentence told me everything. He'd expected success. He'd expected admiration. He'd expected me to stay quiet. He had never expected systems built on documentation instead of charisma. I can fix this, he said. How? We tell people we collaborated. I stared at him. Even now, he wanted half. Half of something he'd taken completely. No. Samantha, no. He took a step closer. We're family. So was I. Silence. For the first time in our lives, he had no speech ready, no clever line, no audience to charm. Just the truth standing between us. And the truth isn't negotiable. I hope, I said quietly, you eventually become the person you always pretended to be. Then I closed the door. That was the last conversation we ever had. The hardest part came later. Not with Ryan. With my parents. Mom arrived first. She cried before I even opened the door. I didn't believe you. No. I should have. Dad came the next day. He stood awkwardly in my garage, looking around at the shelves of notebooks, prototypes, and worn tools. You built all of this. Yes. He picked up one of my earliest sketches. The paper had yellowed around the edges. The pencil marks were faded. The date was unmistakable. Years before Ryan's company had even existed. I'm sorry, he whispered. I wanted those words my entire life. I imagined they'd feel like victory. Instead, they felt like grief. Because apologies don't return birthdays, or opportunities, or years spent wondering whether your own family knows who you are. I forgave them. Eventually. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to carry the weight forever. 6 months later, I stood on a different stage, a much smaller one. No dramatic lighting, no roaring crowd, just engineers, researchers, and humanitarian organizations gathered for a technology conference. They introduced me simply. The inventor. No embellishment, no mythology, just the truth. After my presentation, a young engineering student approached me. She looked nervous. I almost quit engineering. Why? Nobody ever listens to me. I smiled. I know the feeling. She hesitated. How did you keep going? I looked toward the prototype displayed behind me, the same design that had nearly broken me. Then I answered honestly. I stopped trying to be the loudest person in the room. She waited. I focused on becoming the person with the best evidence. She nodded slowly. I think I can do that. I know you can. She smiled, then walked away. For the first time, I realized the story had never really been about revenge. Revenge had only been the bridge. The destination was finally being seen, not because I demanded attention, but because the truth had finally caught up. Sometimes people ask whether I hate Ryan. I don't. Hate requires energy, and I've already spent enough of my life giving him mine. Instead, I remember one lesson above all else. Ideas matter, talent matters, hard work matters, but if you create something worth protecting, document everything, because confidence can fool a room, money can buy headlines, charm can win applause, but timestamps. Timestamps don't care who your parents believed, and the truth has a remarkable memory. Sometimes, it just takes a little longer to answer the phone. Looking back now, people often ask whether I wish I'd confronted Ryan sooner. The truth is, I used to replay every decision in my head. Every time I opened my garage door, every time I emailed him a file, every moment I ignored the little warning signs because I wanted to believe my own brother would never betray me. For a long time, I blamed myself. Not anymore. Trust isn't stupidity. It's something every healthy relationship is built on. The shame belongs to the person who abused that trust, not the person who gave it. In the end, I didn't win because I was louder. I won because I never stopped doing the work, and I never stopped keeping the truth. Ryan built a reputation on borrowed achievements. I built mine one sketch, one failed prototype, one late night, and one notebook at a time. His success disappeared the moment someone asked him to prove it. Mine only began when someone asked me to explain it. If this experience taught me anything, it's that recognition may arrive late, but real expertise leaves evidence behind. And no matter how convincing a lie becomes, it still has to outrun the truth every single day. Eventually, it gets tired. The truth never does. If you enjoyed this revenge story and want to hear more stories where patience beats arrogance and the truth finally catches up with those who think they're untouchable, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments. What would you have done if your own sibling stole years of your work? Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.